Hello and welcome back to another quick tutorial on photo editing with the GNU image manipulation program, otherwise known as the GIMP. So, before we get started, I want to kind of explicate what my motive for these tutorials is, because this is not meant to be a comprehensive overview of all of the functionality in a layer-based raster photo editor. More, I want to give you kind of like a sampler platter, a charcuterie board, if you will, of the sort of things that you can get away with, the things that you can do, and the kinds of manipulations that you can perform on a photo with relatively little difficulty using a free photo editing program. So, in today's tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the luminance formula, and so we're going to look at the applicability of the luminance formula that we talked about in a previous tutorial, and how we can use that luminance formula to build some very interesting effects. Basically, we're going to take a photograph and we're going to desaturate it, make it totally black and white, and then we're going to do what's called the split tone. We're going to take all the darks and replace them with a cool, like some cool color, and we're going to take all the lights, the bright colors, and replace them with something like a warm color. And then this creates like a split tone kind of sepia look, and it's really pretty neat and kind of artistic. So luminance, we're going to use this photo right here. Here's my tutorial pictures. We're going to use this one right here. It's a picture of a rocket in the woods. The luminance formula works like this. So when I, obviously you don't have to memorize this or anything like that, desaturate. So these are our desaturation. We have a few different modes, and luminance is the first one, and the kind of the default one. And it's based on this formula right here. So this is a Wikipedia page on relative luminance. So basically they did a study, and they found out that the perceived brightness of a particular color was relative to like the number of cones that you have in your eyeballs on your retinas. And so they basically said, showed people two colors and asked them which one they thought they perceived as a brighter color. And they came up with this formula. So when you have a color displayed by a pixel, because every pixel in an image is represented by three numbers. So in this case, we have this one. This is represented by R183, G37, B58. So RGB. So a lot of red, a little tiny bit of green, and a little bit more blue, but still not very much. Mostly red. And that creates this color, which I can't remember which one I clicked on. I think it was this one. And so to make that a black and white color, to get a grayscale version of that color, we would take the red value and multiply it by 0.216 or 2126. Take the green value and multiply it by 0.715. Notice this is the highest one. This is the one that's closest to 1. And then 0.0722 for blue. Blue is considered a very dark color, according to the human eye. Blue light contributes the least to the brightness of a thing, whereas green contributes the most, which makes sense, from an evolutionary standpoint. We lived in the woods, and green is a really important color, and green means food and vibrance and life and all that blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we have these three colors. This is sort of the breakdown for luminance. And if you take this formula and then multiply these numbers by these three constants by the R value, the G value, and the B value, and then add them together, you get a new color, which you will use to create your gray. And the end result of applying this luminance color, or this luminance formula, is something like this. And you have other ones, like if you just did, you just average the three numbers together, you get something like this, and depending on what you're going for, any one of these could be valid. Notice how this one, this HSV, the value, the red is almost equal to the green here. See how they really match in brightness? Whereas when I use luminance, the red is much darker than the green of the grass. So you get a very different effect, and it's a very noticeable effect. Depending on which one you do. We are going to use luminance, though, because of what we're going to attempt to do. with this one, because we're going to desaturate this to black and white. But before you do that, this photo is pretty good. It was taken in a very bright setting. It was outside. I'm still going to apply an S-curve to it. I'm going to open up the curves. I'm going to pull up the lights so that we get some much... I'm going to actually kind of give it kind of an extreme curve there. And then I'm going to pull down some darks. And I'm doing this more than I would for a normal photograph. Because of what we're going to do later. So I really want some rich darks and I really want some bright lights. And so I think that's what we're going to go with. We're going to go with something like this. Now we're going to desaturate it. Desaturate using the luminance formula, hit OK. And now we've got some really dark darks, some really light lights. And I think that if you do that kind of extreme S-curve, then you get a really nice effect when you do black and white. You get much darker darks, much lighter lights, and high contrast is the essence of good photography. One of the most important aspects of good photography. So now what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this. I'm going to rename this layer background. And then we're going to duplicate it twice. And this first one we're going to call the lights. And this one we're going to call the darks. So the light tones and the dark tones. So let's turn off the dark layer and just work with the lights for now. So the lights, this is already a mapping, an accurate mapping of all of the light tones, because the lightest tones in the picture are white and the darkest tones are black. So you can see already this is a pretty accurate mapping of all of your light tones in the picture. But just to really make it more extreme and make it so that the darks and the lights aren't going to overlap, we're going to take this lights layer and we're going to go into levels. So this is going to show us basically all of the different levels that are available to us, and we're going to clamp out all the dark ones. So half of 256 is 128, so we're going to clamp out everything darker than 128, and we're just going to delete it. So we're clamping all those values, and now all we have left is the lightest lights. Everything else is completely black. Which is pretty neat. It's actually a pretty neat effect. I actually like this picture just as is. And so you can play around with this stuff and get some really neat effects just by doing that. So let's turn on the darks one again. This time, so if we want this one to be a mapping of all of the dark colors, we're going to have to do something a little bit different. We're going to have to invert the colors to make it negative. So we go to colors and we go to invert. And, oops, I did it on the wrong one. Make sure you select the darks layer, colors, invert, and then you get this negative. So now this picture shows all of the darks as white. So like now the shadow under her arm is white, and where the sunlight was shining on top of her arm is dark. So this is a negative. And now we're going to once again clamp this. So we're going to clamp out everything darker than 128. And so we end up with this kind of total reverse opposite of this one. So there's no overlap between the tones in this picture and this picture. They're both targeting completely different parts of the image. So we're going to turn them both off because we don't actually want, these aren't actually going to be displayed. We're going to use these to create layer maps or what's the word? Shadow luminance maps. Here, I'll just duplicate the background again twice. And we're going to call one of them cool and one of them warm. And let's turn off the warm one for a second and just work with the cool one. We're adding a layer mask. That's the word I was looking for. So we're going to add a layer mask in just a second. But first, let's make it cool. So it's black and white. It's this desaturated S-curved image. So we're going to go into colors, and we're going to go down to colorize right here. Colorize. And this one is the cool colors. Yeah, we'll leave it at this kind of like teal color. To change which color you're doing, you just take this slider and find one that you like. I'm going to go with this teal. And it's kind of ironic to take the teal color because the teal is used in a lot of movies. Teal, using orange and teal as your kind of color palette is very common in movies these days. And so I'm doing that a little bit ironically. So we're doing it really now. You got this kind of interesting teal color, but we only want the parts that are dark to be our cool colors. So we want to get rid of all the highlights and not have those. So we're going to mask this. So we're going to look at our dark mask, and we're going to select this. Or first, we're going to go to the cool, and we're going to add our layer mask. And yeah, we want full opacity, so we want it completely showing through. And now we're going to go up to the dark layer and select it, and then hit edit and copy. Now we're going to click on the layer mask here, or the layer mask, this part right here, not this part. We want to click on this part and hit edit and paste. It'll appear here as a floating selection. We just want to hit this anchor button, and that will anchor it into the layer mask. And now if you look at this picture, it's a subtle difference, but now the colors, if you turn on this, you can see it down here, like wherever there's darkness. If you turn this on, this all turns kind of bluish. There's a teal undertone wherever there's dark colors. So like over here, we turn it off and we turn it on, and you can see that teal come out. And it's a subtle distinction. And if we had gone with a more extreme S-curve, we could have gotten a more pronounced effect. But I think the subtle is a little bit better. So now we have the cool colors. Let's bring in the warm tones. So here's our warm layer. We're going to turn it back on, and notice how we lost that blue. It's all gone. We're going to do colorize. And this time we're going to go and pick something more in the orange. Yeah, something like right about there, I think, is good. So something orange, that's our warm color that we're going to pick. And now the whole picture is kind of warm. But once again, we want to add our layer mask. A white layer mask, and then we want to take our lights, select the lights layer, go to edit, copy all the content from the lights layer, and then paste it into the layer mask here. So edit, paste, or Control V. It'll give you your floating selection. We want to anchor it, and so now the lights layer mask, the lights layer is now pasted into the layer mask for this light tone image. And so now if I turn these both off, I get a totally black and white picture, but if I have them both on, I get this interesting kind of sepia toned effect where all the light tones have kind of an orangish hue to them. See, I'm turning it on and off, and you can see it appear. So it's kind of subtle, but it's there. And then all the dark tones have this blue. You can see it like right here by her pocket, where it turns kind of a bluish color. And then the overall effect is this image right here, which is kind of this split tone, two-tone picture with a really kind of understated effect where all of our dark tones have this cool color, all of our light tones have a warm color, and you could flip it, you could reverse it, you could do all sorts of different interesting things with this, but this is one technique that I encourage you to try whenever you like. Now, for submission purposes, when you're going to submit an image for an assignment, because I think for this tutorial series, you have to submit 2 or 3 pictures. Go to File. First, you might as well save it as a XCF file, as a GIMP file, so it'll appear in your folder as an XCF file. And then File, Export. We want to export it as, I'm going to call it, halftone.png. And then I'll export it into here. And then, it's going to ask me some questions. Go away. Where did that little dialogue go? There it is. Just whatever the defaults are, I don't care. And then it will appear. It's processing the image right now. It takes a second, and then boom, there it is. So if we open it in the photo viewer, there it is, and then it's ready to go. Print that out on a color printer, put it in a frame, looks beautiful. And so that's it. So I hope this series has been useful to you. It's not as comprehensive as some of mine, but my intention is not to be comprehensive with this. You could teach a whole class on design using a photo editor like GIMP or Photoshop. And some of the principles that you'll learn here with GIMP are all directly applicable to Photoshop. You can do anything here, anything in Photoshop that you can do here, and kind of vice versa. Photoshop has some bells and whistles and some little tweaks, like, because I've been using Photoshop a little bit lately, and like some of it doesn't behave the same way. You have to get used to different key bindings. So occasionally I even mess up when I go back to using GIMP a little bit. But the end of the basic principles are still there. You just have to figure out how it's done in Photoshop, because Photoshop basically is the same thing, all the same principles, just different key bindings and things like that. And the toolbar looks a little different, but it still has layers, it still has layer masks, it still has all of the same functions, curves, levels, and things like that. All that stuff still exists. So it's all there. I hope this has been interesting, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.